Good evening, Legacy viewers. Tonight, my guest is André Odendaal from uh, the far side of America, West Coast, near Seattle. And he's going to tell us about his experiences, starting as a medic, moving across to infantry school, moving across to 3-1 Battalion, to 5 Recce, and a bit of time in the Israeli army. So welcome, André. If you
Thanks, Andrew.
can
Yeah,
maybe get started and tell us a bit about yourself.
yeah, sure. Yeah. So as you said, I was called up to the medics for national service. I don't know why I was called up to the medics, but I think because I applied, when you get your papers, you apply for units, and I applied for the infantry, and I did apply in the back. We had a thing for special forces. I applied for that as well, but I got the medic call up. But I think it was because I had a brother who was in the Air Force and he got killed. So I think if you had a sibling who'd been killed, they put you in a less dangerous call up. Plus, my dad was in the Air Force. He was a pilot as well, and he was a brigadier in the Air Force, and he might have not wanted me to, he might have pulled some strings for me to go to the medics, but I wasn't happy about it. But then I kind of convinced myself, you see all these Vietnam movies, and I thought, oh, medic would be pretty cool. And I had that vision of, what a medic was. So yeah, I got called up to the medics in 1983. Got called up to Klipdrift and went through what everybody else went through in those days. You catch the train. I was living in George, catch the train in George all the way up to Pretoria, and then trucks to Klipdrift in Potchefstroom, and the whole experience on the train. We all remember that. Those of us that did, it was quite traumatizing. I think I decided on the train that I needed to get a rank because I saw the dynamic there, and I thought I need to become either a corporal or a lieutenant because that's the only way to survive this. So we got to medics, started basic training. And I'm just going to go into just my feelings about it. I didn't know what to expect in the military, and I was really surprised in basic training that we actually sat and did classes and had blackboards, and I didn't know what I was expecting, and I thought we were just going to running around with rifles, and I don't know. So I was first of all surprised at the structure and the way we did things, and what just jumping forward in time, 'cause, I was in the medics. I went to infantry school, and I did a bunch of training in different places. The medics basic training was really, really difficult. It was hard. We had all our instructors were PTIs, and there was no real control, so we were forever being chased around, and it was really, really tough. And we lived in tents, and they were very strict. And uh, your kind of status in the world in South Africa was what unit you were in. So as a medic, if you went on lead, you're a medic, you were not exactly top of the pile. And it wasn't justified because a lot of the service corps actually had really, really tough basic training. With the infantry units were more organized and more structured and less at the whim of instructors to chase us around. So it was a tough time. And I could just imagine that the other units were even worse. And I was actually wanting to get out of the medics. So I thought the parabats were going to come around, and you had a chance to apply for parabats because they did that in the army. But because we're in the medics, we weren't part of the army. We didn't get that opportunity, so I went through the whole basic training. And we did normal infantry basic training, fire and movement, and all that kind of stuff. And we used R1s, so we trained in weapons, just did normal basic training. And then we had to make a choice of what to do after basic training. So we had a couple of options. We could go to the sports company. I was quite a good rugby player. Go to the sports company, or we could do ops medic, or we could do jails. That's kind of basically it. And so I was kind of thinking about sports company because I'd been playing rugby for Western Transvaal Command at the time, and during basic training, I should go down to Durban to play in the rugby week, which was lucky. So I was doing pretty well with sport. And then the ops medic side of things was also very interesting. I thought, let me go that route. And then I was going to actually apply for that. And then I had a chance encounter with company commander. He just came over to me and asked me what did I want to do. So I said, I'm probably going to go for ops medic. And then he said, no, you should do jails. His name was Boswell, lieutenant. So he said, you should do jails, and I'm going to put you up for jails. So I said, okay. So I went down the junior leaders route with the medics. We stayed in Klipdrift, and the jail selection of Fastbait was crazy. We had this strange captain who had some you know what it was like with special forces and everything those days. There was always some mystique. So there's a strange captain who was in charge of us, and he had some link to the Recce's and link to Op Savannah. We didn't know, but he wasn't stable. So he set up our selection, and we had this 2-day selection for jails, which was actually based on the special forces selection. It was incredibly hard. It was crazy. So got through that, and at that stage, I was like, I want to get out of the army. This is madness. And I didn't know. So I was connecting with my dad, and my dad wrote me a letter just saying, kind of motivating me to hang in there and get through stuff. And he actually broke down the whole structure. So I managed to get through that phase, and then we went into normal jails, and then they moved us to Pretoria, and we did just normal instructor training, and we had to prepare our lesson plans. So it was all aimed at giving basic training to the incoming national service recruits. So got through that as a candidate officer at the time in Pretoria, and just went through the training there, which is very structured and organized. Still very hard PT, and I remember then just starting to get a glimpse of other units. We had ops medic training for special forces, and some doctors were doing special forces training, and they were in Pretoria as well, and just started seeing the equipment that they had and the difference in attitude, and I was just starting to get really interested in that. So I was clearly interested in the operational side of things. So I finished my jails, and I became a lieutenant, second lieutenant. I remember still the day we got our pips. I used to be a candidate officer, went to the local Savi or whatever to buy some food, and some staff sergeant saluted me, and I nearly fell on my back. I couldn't believe, this guy's now saluting me after being, it was just such a dissonance, after being chased around. And I think I was blushing like crazy because I couldn't believe what was going on. But anyhow, so that all started, and then I applied to go to we could go to different, obviously go back to Klipdrift to train basic training, and there were a couple of other postings, and then Swarmel, which was up in Windhoek, was looking for 2 instructors. So I volunteered to go to Swarmel because I thought, well, let's start getting up close to the operational area as I could. And so I applied for Swarmel and got the posting and went up to Windhoek. And we gave some training courses for SWAMED, just like basic training courses, and then a requirement for instructors in the SWAML at Okahania, which is the Southwest Africa equivalent of the infantry school. They needed instructors badly, so I got voluntold to go to Okahania to do a basic training cycle. So I went there basically as an infantry instructor. They gave me the I wasn't wearing a medic beret at that time. They gave me the swab beret with with that gemsbok, and effectively I was infantry, but I wasn't, because everybody knew that I came from the medic. So all my peers knew I came from the medic. So there's that constant friction, you're a medic, whatever. So that was going on all the time, and it was really getting on my nerves. But I was very enthusiastic instructor, and I was wanting to learn everything, and I was super enthusiastic, and really enjoyed it in a way. We'd have to get up really early in the morning, like 5, get on a SAML, go out to the training base, wake the troops up, do the training. And at that stage I got exposure to more infantry orientated training. What we had when we did training in the medics, we didn't have access to LMGs and machine guns. It's just basically fire and movement, and we didn't do any platoon weapons at all. But now I had access to platoon weapons, and I was like very eager to learn them all. So I was often kind of teased for my enthusiasm. But so I got through that, and then went back to Windhoek, and I just wasn't enjoying the Windhoek scene at all with the work we were doing. So I managed to get a posting up to Ondangawa, and went up to actually Oshakati, SWAMED command, and from there they sent. I got a short stint at Ondangawa at the Casevac Center as an ops medic. So I did that for I think about 4 or 5 weeks, and then realized I didn't enjoy being a medic at all. So this wasn't my thing. So it is interesting, but the guys who were getting Casevac in, and we were doing immediate assistance on the Casevacs, patching guys up and stabilizing them. But a lot of it also was like washing guys and cleaning guys, and you have guys from 3-2 who've been out in the bush for like 3 months, and putting them in a bath, having to wash them wasn't quite my wasn't quite my scene. So I was, you know, sort of quickly came to the conclusion that this wasn't my where I wanted to be either. And then I got an opportunity to go down to Oshivelo. They needed a medic with the 2 Transvaal Scottish was preparing for their camp, and I went down to Oshivelo to help them as their medic, even though I was a loot. And I spent their training with them and actually did first counterinsurgency training because, you know, they prepare for the bush war. So I went through a whole proper coin training with them, and I really enjoyed that. And, you know, dealing with the campers, there were some really interesting people that I dealt with. I think there was one of the kind of news reporters was in the unit at the time. Made friends with him. You know, one of the SABC reporters, I can't remember his name at the time. Made friends with him, and you know, that's sort of kind of good experience. And then I was getting orders coming from Windhoek, get back, and I just didn't want to get back. And then eventually they said, no, you have to go back to Windhoek. They really want you there. And so I hitched back down to Windhoek, got there, and it was just stupid stuff and that they were making me do. And then I was just volunteering. I was writing letters saying I want to go to the infantry. I want to go to the infantry. And then finally I got some papers saying, yeah, you've been accepted in jails training at infantry school there's a PF jails and training, and they put me on that. So that is a summary of my first year, you know, ending up at Med and then getting the posting to infantry school. So I got on the train and went down to infantry school to start jails again in infantry school. So that is my first year. So infantry school was really interesting in the difference. I mean, infantry school is very organized. You know, the barracks and everything were pretty good to what I was used to. You know, TV in each barrack room, and Savi, and I think I can't even remember what the Savi is called, but they had hot dogs and you know, we could buy cokes and everything afterwards, which we never had in the medics. And the medics wasn't like that. It was just so then we started the training. I was then put on a Delta company as a 1 pip loot with lance corporals and sergeants who were going through jails. A lot of the guys were coming from 3-2 battalion operational units who were national servicemen who'd wanted to become PF, and we had some really good soldiers, some guys that came out of 3-2. So we were in a group together, but they made me stay in the bungalow with NCOs and officers, NCOs and privates, which was interesting. So I went through this whole infantry school experience as a loot, but not a loot. So it was difficult. But I remember one occasion we were in the mess hall, and one of the sergeants came in, and I was in the privates mess hall as a loot, and we just done PT, so I didn't have any rank. And one of the sergeants came in, and he was yelling and shouting and acting like a complete idiot, and I was just staring at him, like, you know, and he came over to me like this far away from me, and you know the way they were in my face, and he started shouting at me. I said to him, "Yeah, do you know you're speaking to a lieutenant now?" And he just went white, and then he remembered that there was actually an officer in this group, and that kind of backed him down. So that training was very interesting. Going through the full infantry school instructor training, and that took 6 months, and then that was the end of my national service. They had the 8 parade, and I kind of clawed out from infantry school, and that was my national service. So it's kind of interesting. You know, went through a lot of different units and places, and you know, I think I experienced a lot as a national serviceman, more than most do. You know, going from medics all the way to infantry school, and you know, being up in the operational area for a while. So that was interesting. And then I did really want to carry on with the with the military, and then you know, I had applied for short service. So that was my national service. I don't know if you have any questions or like comments.
Well, firstly, sorry to hear about your brother. I mean, I know it's a long time ago now, but it's always a tough one.
Yeah.
And your dad in the Air Force, what did he fly or?
So yeah, that's an interesting story. So my dad was he flew in World War II in Korea. He flew Kitty Hawks and Mustangs in World War II in Korea, and then um, he flew Vampires. So he was out in Longabon. He flew Vampires, and then he was the test pilot to select the Impala for the South African Air Force. So he went to Europe and he tested all the different planes and selected the Impala, and you know, started that whole contract. So he was responsible for that. I've got pictures of him flying testing, and I've got all these models that he got given, you know, as the test pilot. I've got them at home. Yeah. So ironically, the plane my brother got killed in was an Impala, so it was a bit of a irony there. So he flew Impalas, but he was Inspector General of the Air Force. He's a brigadier, but he was a difficult guy because he was anti-establishment, so he's Afrikaans, Afrikaner, but he wasn't part of the Broederbond, and he was because he'd volunteered, he was a smart supporter, and there was all that history, and by the time the apartheid government was going, they had the Broederbond, and you had to sort of fit in, and a lot of the World War II veterans were not well regarded by the SADF at the time, so he had a hard time with them. So he actually got told that he'd never become a general. He was given the opportunity of taking any brigadier position that he wanted to, and then he resigned. So he quit. He was really upset. But he was the peer of Dennis Hope and all those folks. They were all together. But he was very outspoken, and he didn't. He was very outspoken against the government and against the military, the way they were and everything. And so he wasn't very popular. But he was an exceptional pilot. He was a really good pilot. So yeah, that is his story. I mean, it's hard growing up with him as well. He was a pretty tough guy. His nickname was Tank. So you can imagine, he's 6 foot something, like weight 220 pounds. He's a big guy, but also, he saw some serious combat in World War II, and there's a bit of a connection which we can talk about later. He was involved in escape and invasion exercise in Yugoslavia, and I was involved in escape and invasion in Angola as well. So kind of had that link.
Okay, so your national service as such, you never really saw action. I mean, other than patching guys up, and you
Yeah,
you, you
yeah,
weren't involved in any
yeah. No, no,
hostilities
no,
as
no
such.
action.
Okay,
No,
and
no.
then
Yeah,
and then yeah, sorry.
no, no. Except yeah, being at Ondangwa, seeing the guys coming in, they started getting a sense of it. Then also just seeing, because the fire parabats were on fire force there and everything, just getting a sense of what was actually going on. But that's no action at all. But I did, like one thing, I think a lot of people feel the same. Like there was like a getting to Ondangwa and the Oshikati in the operational area. There was just like, I don't know if you had the same feeling, just like I don't know, there was an atmosphere there which was just addictive. I just really liked it, just something was going on, and that kind of got in me, and I wanted to get more involved. I really wanted to get involved in what was going on. I wasn't motivated by, definitely not apartheid or anything. Sure, I was influenced by the whole communism thing. We're fighting for communism, but there was a air of excitement there, which I think any young man feels. As kind of like a sense of adventure, which was something I felt. So that's yeah, and that I think that was the thing that made me want to stay on for another 5 years and try and get more involved in the whole thing. It was like I was in Namibia, knew about Angola, is getting this atmosphere, and just wanted to see more. So it was more a sense of adventure than anything else. Yeah,
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear stories of the sort of the units that you don't really see much of. They work hard in the background and probably don't get the
yeah,
credit. I was involved
yeah,
in Operation Skeptic, Smoke Shovel, where we lost 13 guys. And,
yeah,
I went back last year to the battle site, and it was just one of the comments I made that we lost 13 guys, but there were 17 Casovacs that day, and all 17
yeah,
survived. And
yeah,
and
yeah.
that couldn't have happened without the guys in Ondangwa or Oshikati or Grootfontein.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
One of my very good friends, HP Ferreira, he got shot through the stomach with a 14.5 anti-aircraft gun,
Wow,
was declared dead, and they discovered a pulse. I
wow.
see him regularly. He's still got a big hole in his back. He's still struggling. He's had 100 odd operations in the last 42 years. But to me, that is a miracle. But to a large extent, was the starting point was the medics that
Yeah,
attended to him probably at the Smoke Shell battle site. And then I think he went to Ndongo for a while, then Grootfontein. He woke up 8 days later in one mill, and he was there for 3 years. But those first few hours or first few days, and I think you know, for most guys in the army, you always looked at the medics as the sort of, well, that was the easy
exactly. Yeah,
become a
yeah,
cook or a chef or a medic.
yeah,
That's your best option. And then,
yeah,
as you're
yeah,
saying, You didn't have easy life at all. You didn't have TV sets,
No, yeah,
and yeah, so
yeah,
it's and I've often said I think we don't we as 6-1 veterans we get together quite often, and particularly there's a good group of our smoke shell veterans that get together. And I often say, we never met the chopper pilots that pull the guys out. We never
yeah,
met the guys behind the scenes, and they never really got credited for having
yeah,
been part of that operation. But yeah.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah,
you then packed your bags, went home to George,
yeah,
because the guys didn't sign you up for short service
yeah,
immediately.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so then I was down in George surfing and just hanging out, just waiting for something to happen. Yeah, my dad wasn't orientated towards sending me to university or anything. He was like, you have to find your own way in life, and yes, I was down in George surfing. But just one point to make that we're going back to the medics. Part of what you're saying is true, and I have to give full credit to the training we got. Like even as an officer going through the shortened ops medic training we did, we had to Friday nights go to emergency, the ER in California and these places and actually patch up folks. So for I think about 2 months, every Friday night we were in the ER actually applying medic. So we were dealing with people coming in, who'd been beaten up. I remember one woman being stretchered in, and there was like beautiful girl lying there and couldn't see what was wrong with her and rolled over, and somebody had stabbed her with a bicycle spoke in her ribs, lung collapsed, and we had to triage this stuff ourselves, as we dealt with it. And I remember stitching a guy up for the first time on his head, and I didn't do it properly. When you stitch somebody, you start in the middle and you quadrant it. I started on the side, stitched him, and he had this big lump on his head in the end. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And he was like so grateful, and they all thought we were doctors, And but yeah, we got the training was superb, and the support was superb. So you're right, those ops medics were one of my regrets is not stealing an ops medic bag, because the ops medic bags were just so well kitted out and equipped. And I had the opportunity once to grab one and I didn't. But you're right. I mean, the training was superb. And then we can loop back, because I actually got Kazovac myself once, and your comment about the helicopter pilots, I actually got saved by helicopter pilots, and I met them in a pub one night by chance. And you're right, just connecting with these people that just do these things for you, it is amazing. The professionalism was amazing. I must say, comparing, because I went to Israel and I was in the Israeli military, then I had a sense of reference to South Africa, and we had really good equipment, really good training, good tactics. It is superb, particularly when you think that Israel was supposed to be which is another discussion we could talk about later, but Israel is supposed to be the elite of the elite. It was nowhere to compare to what we had. We were really, really well trained. So that's a good point across all the services, I think. Yeah.
Well, two interesting points. One is I actually did a very short medics course while I was at OneSA, just to
Mm.
sort of help out if something went wrong. And Friday nights we spent at Palinomi Hospital, and as they came
Yeah.
in with knives sticking out of them and things like that,
The same
I
thing.
think we
Yeah.
only learned two things: how to sew and how to put a drip in. But the idea was that
Still.
if anyone got
Yeah.
shot, you plugged a drip into their arm and then plugged the hole, and that was about it. But
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah.
So I understand where you're coming from about your weekends at the local hospital. And then yeah, and this is something totally different. Fossey recently interviewed a guy from South Africa, but at the age of 14 moved across to Israel, and he served
Yeah.
in the Israeli army, and I think he ended up as a major. And
Yeah.
it's not Fossey, of course, has interviewed him, and his video is due to be released at some stage in the not too distant future. I haven't obviously don't have the insight there, but one of the things Koos had suggested was maybe to try and get uh, some South Africans to do a joint discussion with this guy, because apparently he had
Oh,
some ideas of how he thinks we should have done things as opposed to the way they would do things. And
so
and just listening to you, who served on both sides, you would be a good
yeah.
candidate to
I
put
thought
into that
I would
discussion.
I, I would love to do that because I can tell you that I was an unusual character. I was already in my 30s when I went, and the Israeli system's totally different, but I was applying and getting interviewed by colonels and generals, and they didn't know where to place me in the Israeli army because they have this system of three-year conscripts, and every unit basically goes through as a 3-year batch. So even the special forces units and everything, they that's how they go through. They don't really have a permanent force army. So they didn't know where to put me, and they were talking to me about training and everything. And in the recce's, I was in small team reconnaissance, and we did missions two people behind enemy lines on our own. And I was telling the Israelis about this, and the guy just said to me, "I don't believe you. You're lying." He would not believe. I was telling him about our tactics and things. He just said, "No, I don't believe you." So it was completely different structure. The Israelis are totally different, and we can talk about it. But their war was more about heavy armor, bunkers, fortifications. Even in the West Bank, they just told that then the equipment was they didn't have any concept like anything like Caspers or equipment like that. They're just totally different, and but it's a different discussion. But it was very disappointing for me. Um, but yeah, I did my service there for a while, and then actually left, and I tried to get into SAS after that. And when I got to the SAS, I got interviewed, and when they heard I'd been in the Israeli army, they said, "Forget it, you're not going to pass our security clearance." So that was the end of my military career. But now we're jumping way forward. But
Okay.
yeah, that was
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll keep you in mind when we eventually set up this interview.
for sure. Yeah,
And yeah, because I mean, that would be quite interesting if you've got someone who served on both sides. Yeah, then okay,
yeah,
so then you went off home for a while. Um, what
yeah.
sort of time frame were you before you got the call up to from there you then your next move was 3-1 or
Yeah, exactly. I got the timeline here. So I cloud out in December 87, and then no, not 87, 84. And then I got papers to go to be accepted for short service, and started in March 85. But they didn't want to send me to Amiga directly, so they sent me to Pretoria, to Natal, Northern Transvaal Command, because they wanted me to do my formative officers training first, because they said if I went to Amiga, I would never do my formative officers training because they wouldn't let me go. So they wanted me to do the training first and then go to Amiga. So they sent me to, I was a ops officer in Northern Transvaal Command for about a month until the course started, which is an interesting month because that is when all the riots was really starting in South Africa. The internal unrest was starting, and I just remember the telexes every day coming through of like this, the necklaces and just all the things going on in the country at that time. It is eye opening, right? So I had that short experience, but then started my formative training, which is this, all PFs have to go through it, where they try and teach you to become an officer and a gentleman, and all you end up learning is how to drink a lot. And that's in Pretoria. So we finished that, and we got pretty fit, I was in pretty good shape, and then flew up to Omega. But I remember before Omega, I slept the night in Rundu, and I was really nervous now because I knew I was going to an operational unit. I kind of had a bit of I felt I wasn't good enough because I hadn't gone through all the coin training through infantry school, and so I thought I had gaps in my education, and here I was going to become a platoon commander in an operational unit. So I was a bit nervous, and I knew the reputation of the Bushmen was preceded me already, so I was like just wondering, am I going to be able to manage? And I remember lying in the bed in Rundu, waiting to get over to Amiga the next day, and hearing the officers in the bar talking about, just talking, war stories, the way guys do, and I was like, oh my, I don't know if I'm up for this. I was really I had an inferiority complex about it, so I was pretty nervous about going. So then I went over to Amiga the next day, and my first day at Amiga, they were doing fitness tests. So I came in, and they gave me a kimbo to sleep in. Like they had these like little wooden huts for the officers to stay in. So they gave me my room and everything, and then said, "Oh, there's come to the runway in the evening. We're doing fitness tests with the officers." So I went down, and the first 2,4 down the runway, because I was in good shape. I think I came first or second, and the guys were looking at me like, "Who is this? Who is this guy?" Because I hadn't gone through the traditional intake in Amiga. So they came from infantry school, and they'd have like an initiation phase, and went through quite a tough initiation phase, and I kind of leapfrogged that. So I wasn't part of the group, and they were checking me out. So it was difficult in the beginning trying to fit in and you know, get oriented, because I had this whole medic background and, you know, and PF infantry school, and so it was difficult. And then went on my first operation. Because in Omega we spent 6 weeks in the base, 6 weeks on ops. So first ops I went out, they felt I wasn't qualified enough to be a platoon commander, so I went in as a sergeant, you know, as a platoon sergeant under one of the PF officers. I'm going to try and avoid people's names because I don't know if people really want me to talk about them, but one of the PF full lieutenants, he was a parabat, so people probably know who he is. Ex-parabat. He'd also been through the recce selection, but fell off somewhere along the line, but he managed to get through the parabat training. So he was my platoon commander, and I was basically the platoon sergeant. So did the 6 week stint with him, just learning the ropes, and you know, that was all in around the Inanna area. We just did patrols, and you know, just nothing of consequence really happened, except that I got enamored with the HK-21 machine gun, and so I was running around with the HK-21 machine gunner, and one night the dogs, André might have told the story. One night the dogs were barking in the kraals like crazy, and so Eugene, I got leaking his name already. So Eugene Vates, he jumped up, grabbed my HK-21 and started firing off into the night. But we had our radio antennas were set up, and he shot the antennas down, but it shut the dogs up. But yeah, so we had some. I think we had one follow up internally where we were on spurs, and we were chasing, and we lost the spur. They were bomb shelling, and we lost the spur. That was only like kind of anything close to, you know, contact with the enemy at the time. So nothing came of that, and we finished the first tour. But by then I kind of like knew how to operate and knew what was going on. Came back to Omega and then did the 6 weeks in the base. No, Omega was, although, you know, folks, it was operational unit. It was also more a comm ops unit. So we, you know, it's more about the base itself, and they would fly visitors and, you know, executives and people out to Omega to experience, you know, what the army was like. And the base was in immaculate order. And you know, the Bushmen, when we came back, we always had to keep the base clean and everything. So we just spent a lot of time doing that, and a lot of time doing admin on vacation. We didn't really spend much time training, and then we do the next deployment, and then, you know, that's how we worked. So you know, if you compare Omega to 3.2 or 101 or, you know, Kufut, we weren't that ops orientated, and it was frustration for us junior leaders, because we wanted to do ops, but the leadership at the time were like focused on, and the word was, you know, we're first going to get the communication side of things in order, and then we'll start focusing on the operational side of things. So, you know, we never really did a lot of operational training while we were back in the base. It was all, you know, just more like base maintenance and stuff. So then I got the second deployment, and then it was about a year and a half, and it all becomes like kind of, you know, I can't remember which deployment, what happened in which deployment, but then went through a bunch of adventures in the deployments following. I was, you know, then my own Romeo Mike commander. So we had each team was called Romeo Mike, and we had a call sign. And you know, we then moved across to start operating, because we initially were operating in the Inanna area. Subsequent operations were all around Rukana. So we went down, and I got to know that Rukana area really well, particularly in Angola, like west of the Kunene, like operated there a lot. And actually, when I was in the recce later, I operated there a lot as well. So a lot of that groundwork was kind of useful because I knew the terrain a lot. So we did a lot of operations in that area, and then it was just, you know, basically deploying, trying to find the enemy, working off intelligence, you know, trying to stop any insurgencies, you know, that kind of thing. And then from time to time, when we had spur to chase, we were, you know, I remember on occasions we had to stop at the cup lane and wait for permission to go into Angola to follow up. And in other times we were deploying full time in Angola, so it depended on the political situation. You know, so there's always some politics going on whether we could be in Angola or not. And yeah, so each deployment was very different. some of the deployments were really boring. We had to, one deployment, we had to protect anti-malaria teams. So they had these teams going around spraying all the kraals to kill the mosquitoes. And we spent 6 weeks just looking after them. It was the most boring 6 weeks of my life. And then the other really boring one was Rokana protecting the power lines. We had to patrol up and down the power lines to just protect the power lines, from any sabotage or whatever. That was also very boring. But then we got some, when we started deploying into, we had different areas up into Angola, and particularly north of Angola, north of Rokana. Those were more interesting deployments. And there we had some incidents where we got some spur of SWAPO exfiltrating out of Namibia, and typically so just full disclosure, I was never in a contact from a follow-up in tracking spurs. There were some other incidents, but we never got to contact. And sometimes we were pretty close. And I remember the one occasion we were following a spur up, and they'd heard us, and they cocked their rifles, and we came across the AK rounds lying on the ground and saw that they were starting to bomb shell and everything. So we were pretty close, but the SWAPO at that time were, they were heading to Zongongo and those places, and their anti-track skills were really good. And we had to stop once we got within a certain perimeter from Zongongo. So we never actually got any kills off that. And I sometimes think of the Bushmen are not that motivated in getting to contact, because sometimes this spur will just miraculously be lost, so there was that. So we had a couple of follow-ups. Actually, the interesting thing is, we deployed to that area often, we got to know the locals pretty well. There was one situation where we were on a hot spur. It was the same one where we picked up the AK rounds, and this guy, Ovambo, was coming down on his bicycle, all dressed up, combing their hair, the fairs and everything, all dressed up. And he must have seen the SWAPO. So we stopped and started interrogating the guy. And he was just like, I saw nothing. And we were quite rough on him, and a little bit of waterboarding, and left him, but he wouldn't tell us anything. We didn't have time, so we left him kind of dazed, sitting down the side of the road, and we just gave him some rat packs and went on. And then 2 deployments later, we were coming up to the kraal and came up, and there was a big wedding going on. It was the same guy, and he was getting married, and he remembered us, and he had no ill will towards us, and he remembered us, and we had this interaction, and so we started to get to know the locals quite well, which was pretty interesting. But the connection between the Bushmen and the problem with why we were not that effective as well, because the Bushmen and the Vambos had basic hatred towards each other. So we never got information from the locals. They wouldn't tell us anything. Whereas 101 and Kufut, obviously, half of them are family with each other, and they got a lot of information. They wouldn't tell us anything. So that was always very frustrating. So as a loot, I was like, as a platoon commander, like, I was always knowing we were being lied to, but not knowing what. It was just so frustrating, because you just knew something was going on, but nobody knew anything. And we were kind of bound by, I had no interest in torturing people, interrogating people, and so like I had no interest in that. So we were always in this like world of like, we knew that stuff was going on, but we weren't part of it. So we had to be opportunistic on picking up spur ourselves, or that's the only way we could come into contact with the enemy, is just by being vigilant ourselves. We never got any information. It was really interesting, actually. We got dropped off on one op, and we were going to do, because typically we did patrols with the vehicles, and we only had Biffles. We didn't have Caspers, which was also a reason why we weren't that effective. The Biffles were just not quite the same standard as Caspers. But the one op, we got dropped off, and we were going to do patrols in Angola to try and pick up activity. And we got dropped off, and our radios weren't working. So for 3 days we were trying to make comms and couldn't get comms, and couldn't. So nobody was flying out to help us or anything. So I decided we need to do something. So I took a section, and we made a roadblock on one of the paths, and every Avambo coming up on his bike, we stopped and we took their bikes. So we took like 10 bikes, 12 bikes, bicycles, and then commandeered them. And then that's myself in that section. We rode down to the Copland to get back to Rokana to get a new radio. So we were riding down, I remember, and it was like raining, and we were riding in a line. And as we came to the kraals, the locals just ran. They just ran because they saw us coming. They thought we were UNITA. So you could then see how the locals were. They had SWAPO, obviously, they had UNITA, and then they had us. They knew we were not doing anything to them, so they were kind of like, yeah, you guys are coming up, and we just say nothing. When they saw us coming as UNITA, they saw something and they just ran away, because clearly the interaction with UNITA and them was a different story, right? So we kind of got that aspect of the Vambos at the time. They were just these people in the middle, just trying to get by, and us being the Bushmen and white South Africans, we just had no connection there. So they just knew we weren't going to do much to them. So it is kind of interesting. So some incidents that happened, like I got more involved in, so no context, but I was always curious, and the first kind of interaction with the enemy, which was violent, was we were deployed near Onjiva, and this was east of the Kunene at the time, and nothing was going on, and I was like starting to push the envelope, pushing the patrol up, getting closer and closer to Onjiva, and we had a Duomini with us, and I set up the team, and I went off on a section patrol, trying to find stuff, and the team was an all-round defense, and the Duomini was lying on top of one of the biffles, and the Vapla patrol came along, and they they fired an RPG at the biffles, and they did an airburst above the platoon, and the Duomini fell off the biffle, and he was a big guy, and the Bushmen always they have comments in it, so fell off the biffle, and then we started a bit of a follow up, but we were really close to Anjiva at the time, really, really close. So we got to one crawl, and there were like Sierra tracks in the crawl, and a guy dashed off, and he jumped over the fence, and I had my rifle, and he was a Fapla, so I had my rifle, and I aimed, and was going to shoot, so I started shooting, and the guy got away, and I couldn't believe it, and then I looked at my sights. The R1 sights were like 100 meters, 300 meters. Some of my sights had gone up to 300 meters. So I was shooting over the guy's head. That was my first kind of contact with the enemy, and then but then the base knew that we were there, and then we started getting scared from the radio. They said, like, you need to get out of there, they know you're there, and just as we were getting ready to leave, we just heard the explosions coming from Manjiva, and they were firing BM-21s were firing 122 rockets at us. So they started stonking us the rockets, so we got away. And it was like they were just firing, in the area. They didn't care about the kraals or locals or whatever. And we got away. And then, of course, we were curious, so we went back, and then we picked up, the tail units of the rockets and everything, and we kept them and took them back to the base later on. But so that was my first kind of, getting in contact with the enemy. So it's quite, kind of exciting. But the rest was just, I don't know. There's, like, as I said, there's this like sense of excitement and mystique in Angola, which I just loved. I just loved Angola. As those that have been there, the Portuguese dams and those water towers and the old farms. It's just exciting, just traveling around and finding and just exploring. And I remember the one time coming out, we were driving out, get back down to Ruakana, and just out of on the shore, and these like 6 horses just were running next to us. Just wild horses. Must have been from the old Angolan farms, beautiful horses, and they were just riding down there we were in our buffaloes, riding down with these horses running with us, and like, just beautiful day, and it's just so surreal. So you had these things that happened, as a young man, and you had this freedom to just explore and do things. It was really exciting. It is fun, and we weren't in heavy combat or anything, so there wasn't really much going on from our perspective. And I know the other units, it was different, but at that stage, I think we had button swap it down so much that they were just trying to get in, get out, and they were avoiding any combat. Later on, we had that one incident just before the war ended, when they came down and did a conventional attack. But at this stage, they were just trying to avoid. And we did have some ex-swappers that were captured that worked with us, and I remember talking to the one guy, and he said he was captured. They were sitting, they were having in a TV, and they were sitting, and they didn't even hear the Caspers coming up. They said, like, they were sitting there, and the next minute there were Caspers around them, and they were in contact. So I think 101 and Kufut was just so effective in stopping any insurgency, and it was really hard for those. I got to take my hat off to the swapper guys. They were so brave to come down and do what they did and get back, because that is a machine. 101 Kufut, us, they had that whole area completely cut down. And the difference between us and the Israelis was we actually occupied the terrain, right? So we occupied the terrain, we're in the terrain and almost part of the terrain. So, SWAPO had to get by all of us. It wasn't, they had to avoid some base or whatever. It was like we were there. So, it was pretty effective. And at that time, there weren't that many attacks on the bases or anything. From time to time, there was like a mortar attack or, some attack on some of the bases, but nothing serious, So I think things are buttoned down. This is like, going up to 85, 86. So, I think our tactics were pretty good at that time. Then the other incidents I had was like, I actually won the Cracker Jack Award, which is not anything to be proud of. It means I got involved in the most landmine incidents. I think I was involved in 4 or 5. I got blown up myself and got casevaced. That was, we were patrolling near an area called Tajipa in Angola. It was me and André Boyster, and we were coming up a river. We were following SOPs. We were like following this riverbed, and one of the other buffalo had gone forward as a kind of just a bit of a recce, and we just heard this bang, and I thought it was an RPG, so I thought we were in contact. So I leaned over to my driver and told him to go, and just telling him to pull left and getting ready for contact, and then I rode over a landmine. So as I was leaning over, the left wheel where I was leaning actually hit the mine and blew up, and I got a piece of shrapnel in my hand. And I was standing there. Buffalo came down and everything, and I was on the radio calling for André Boyster. He was Boyster, whatever. Next thing, I was still trying to talk. I couldn't hear anything. And he was standing next to me already. And I'm yelling at him on the radio, but he got off and come run up to see everything's okay. So the two buffaloes got blown up. And then nobody was really injured except me, and I was looking at my hand. I thought it was okay. And the first radio, I told them the situation, and then said we're all okay. And then some of the Bushmen were like, my back's really sore, and so then we thought, okay, maybe we need to casevac some guys out. And then my hand by then was getting really sore, and I saw like my finger was almost off. It was like just hanging on a thread. So then we called in the chopper, and they casevaced us out, and that's where I got to be on the receiving side of the medics in Angola and everything. So they casevaced back to South Africa and got my hand fixed up. But the one thing they didn't check was my ears, and I went home on sick leave, and I just started getting this massive earache. And then went to the hospital in George, and they saw both my eardrums had been perforated. So I had that as well. So they fixed me up, and by the time I went back to Omega, I was completely deaf in the one ear, and they wouldn't let me go on ops. So this is where me and the kind of PF, even though it was short service, the kind of the leadership clashed a little bit because I couldn't go on ops. So they wanted to put me on, and I couldn't shoot either because I was on light duty for my ear. So they made me the edge, the edge of the unit, which was a complete disaster. So because the unit was, there were a lot of guests coming in and everything. The colonel at the time was really focused on the guests, and people would come in and they'd, have sit down and have talks and whatever. And part of it was catering, so he was always on me about there were not enough mints in the place where the guests were, and this wasn't good and that wasn't good, and it's just I was not interested in this at all. So then they basically got demoted and sent to the training wing, but I couldn't really do any training because I couldn't shoot. So then I was just nagging, and there's Swazini Odia was in charge of the training. Then he's like a legend in Omega, and he's really nice. And he just said, like, I'm gonna try and get you back on ops. And they sent me back on ops, but I wasn't allowed to actually go on patrolling. So then I was actually made company commander at the time. So then I was just controlling the ops for a while until I could get back my medical clearance and get back on doing missions myself. But yeah, I really struggled in Omega at the time because I was anti-establishment, like a lot of us were. Didn't like being told what to do. Wasn't interested in the Bushmen would like spend the whole day like just dragging these poles around just to make the sand flat and make the base look nice. And I had no interest in that. And we actually, getting back to the point of effectiveness, we because we had a recce wing and everything. We could have spent a lot of time in that 6 weeks of retraining, trying to chase out recce guys and just do effective training, but we did nothing really, nothing at all. We either the guys were going on leave or we do some shooting, and but the rest is base maintenance. So it's kind of that wasn't good. And then I was applying. I just wanted to get more operations, so I was applying to 3-2 Battalion because I'd been to 3-2 to do a DEMS course. They were down the road, and I just saw the difference there to what we were doing. I mean, they were just a combat unit, and they were just everything was about training around ops. I applied for the 3-2 Battalion, and the colonel turned me down. He wouldn't let me go. So then I went back on ops, and then had a couple of other incidents where some of the one or two vehicles got blown up. I wasn't on them, and that's how I got the crackerjack. But then also started getting really successful at lifting landmines. We had one situation near Zongongo when we were driving up. We'd been told by an informant that there were mines in a certain place, and we were patrolling up really carefully. And the Bushmen, they're superb in seeing stuff, and even I could see there's been digging going on here, but near the road. So we stopped and started excavating, and we lifted about, I don't know, 16, 17 mines that had been placed in the area to obviously, try and blow up some Caspers or Buffles. So we lifted those, and then we found another situation where we found 3 cheese mines, and we lifted them, and then we found the locals actually told us about this one situation because the swap would booby trap this whole path and area, and the locals obviously inconvenienced because they wanted to get to water, and then we found a whole bunch of pomzets and those little Black Widow coffin mines. So we lifted those, and then we lifted a bunch of caches of we found some AKs and mortars. So we started getting successful, but it was a lot of us from informants, ex-swappers. So we lifted a lot of mines, and I got a commendation signal, from that. So then we're coming close to, then I wasn't accepted in 3-2, and I didn't know what to do. So then I said, okay, I'm going to go for broke, and I applied for special forces selection. In those days you write a letter, and then something has to action out of it. So I applied for special forces selection, and the signal came through, you've been accepted. You're going to have to go down to Durban, and I think it was February. The orders were for February, and I knew by, I think it was November already. So then I knew how to get ready. So my last deployment, I actually went on ops with weights. So I bought some weights from the Savi. So I bought a weight bar and discs, and I took them on ops with me. And every night I was in the TV at night doing weights, and I'd park the log buffle next to my buffle so I could put a bar up so I could do pull-ups. So I was training like crazy, and then I was making sure that I was doing everything on the ground. I was like running on the spoor. I was walking. I was trying to do everything, carrying as heavy as I could. So I knew, because we knew there were rumors about what recce selection was, but we didn't know quite. Nobody knew what it was. This is actually very different from the American military and even the Israeli military, where you know exactly what to expect and you can train and prepare for it. And in America, they actually have, if you want to become a SEAL, you can go on YouTube, you can see exactly what you have to do and how to train for it. The recce's was like nobody knew. It was like all rumors, but you just knew you had to be in really good shape, and there were some rumors about some really bad things that are going to happen to you, right? So, and I knew cold water treatment was one of them, and I hate cold water. So then I started, whenever I could, I was having ice cold showers in winter just to try and I hated it, but I just did it, So I was preparing myself and I was training, and came back, and then I had a couple of weeks in Omega before I had to go down, and then I was just running and training, and then myself and one other officer went down. He was in the recce wing. He became a operator after me. He didn't pass the selection that I did, but he came back and passed. So we went down together, and then the wheels fell off a little bit because we got to Durban, and we didn't want to go to the base immediately because we knew if we went to the base, we'd not get out. So we booked ourselves into the Four Seasons Hotel, and we had about 3 nights of just drinking, which wasn't doing much for my fitness, but we were just drinking. And I think I went one or two runs down the Marine Parade, but and then we went into we were supposed to go into start do the pre-selection, and went into the bluff. And I just remember driving at the bluff, just thinking, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" I was like terrified, because the whole ethos of the recce's and special forces. So that was very intimidating. And I had, I remember once. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah,
No, I was
yeah.
just going to say, and your ears and that didn't affect your getting
I
into
was
the recce's?
I was okay by then. I recovered.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
sorted out.
But I was
Okay,
pretty deaf though in my 1 year. But yeah, I was okay. I passed the medicals. Yeah.
okay. I
But
think
the big thing
before,
in the recce's is the.
yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was going to say, maybe before we carry on with the recce's, I just wanted to ask you a couple of things in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
your medic training. Did that ever get used in your time at 3-1? Did you ever have to put your medic training to use, or was that sort of not
Not
your
not
job anymore and
not
not a
really.
problem?
Not really.
Yeah,
No. No. We had medics. So we had medics assigned.
yeah,
We had ops medics assigned interviews. So no, not really. No.
yeah.
No, I did. I mean, but it was more like on illness next to the Bushmen are always having malaria and stuff. So we'd be giving, but all of us, gave them ampicillin, and
So
we
it
were
wasn't,
kind of the medic for the team. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. But no trauma, no trauma stuff. No, um, no. Um, yeah. So yeah, that is. I mean, I'm missing so much because there's so much going on that happened in the bush, and I'm just thinking of things coming back like I remember the one time we stopped at a cooker and we, the Bushmen went in to get some drinks or whatever, and they wouldn't come out, and we were yelling at them to get out, and eventually I took a smoke grenade and chucked it into the cooker to get them out. We do stuff like that all the time, with there's like all these things going on and
All the fun stuff.
and building relationships. Yeah, we were naughty, but very yeah, and the relationship with the Bushmen, once they get to know you, it was pretty good. I mean, we'd have good relations with them, and you had your favorites, and you know, some of them were better than others. Oh, one story which I remembered now was we did an operation with 101 where we went north of Zongongo and we were going to protect the Haag, the helicopter. I don't know what that is in English, but there was a helicopter base which gunships were going to be based on, and we were supposed to defend that. And so we went up and came across, and it was east of the Kunene, but north of Zongongo. And so the Alouettes came in, and we were patrolling around the area, and we had I was riding along there, and we saw a lion spoor on the path, and it was like surprising. So out of interest, we just started following up on the lion spoor, and then suddenly there was like these skid marks, and the lion jumped into the bush, and then we found a fapla jacket. So the lion must have been stalking a fapla, and fapla, is the Angolan army, and the guy must have got away, but his jacket was lying there all clawed up, and then we had spoor to follow. So then it suddenly became, oh, okay, and so we got in line and started doing a follow up, and they must have heard us coming, but we actually came into a small base, like a platoon-sized base, and we're just getting ready for massive contact. And I don't know why I didn't start opening fire. For some reason, I was like holding fire and advancing, but they all gapped it, and they jumped in their boats, and we're going across the river by the time we got there. So we tried to mortar them, and we were chucking mortars in the Kunene, but they got across, and we didn't have any effect. But then the whole base was just full of all this like great equipment. Everybody always wants a nice Fapla hat and Fapla jacket and AK bayonets, and there was just everything there. So I've still got some stuff that we got. I got a nice AK bayonet and a Fapla jacket that I gave my son, and just all these spoils of war, which are really exciting. But then we knew we were kind of in a hot area, and then I think the next day we just heard mortars coming from the other side of the river, and they were starting to bomb trying to bomb the helicopter assembly area, and they were firing heavy mortars. So I immediately said, I got my mortar guys and everything, and tried to get one of the sections. Said, okay, let's go get the mortars. Let's go and see if we can attack them. They were on the other side of the river though, and half the Bushmen just like, we're not going. They just refused. So a couple of them picked up. So I was in such a bad mood. I grabbed the RPG out of RPG with three anti-personnel rockets. They were like rare as chicken's teeth. So I had three of them, and I grabbed the mortar, and then three or four other Bushmen grabbed extra mortars, and we ran towards the side of the river and got to the Kunene, and it was on the embankment, and we could see like a village on the other side where they were mortaring from. So we got the 60 mil up, and we were trying to lob mortars over. We couldn't get the range, and we were landing in the river. And then I used the RPG, the anti-personnel RPG, and I kind of fired at an angle and managed to kind of get closer to the village, but we couldn't see if we were having any effect at all. But then I fired them off, and then we realized they're going to start shooting at us, so ran back to the buffers and everything, and then moved away and got away. That is kind of a interesting like just day, you know. But again, no actual kills, combat, you know, no, you know, we didn't see, you know, any close combat at all. But that is another situation. But so yeah, that is the end of my, you know, any conflict or combat that I had, you know, in Amigo. Like nothing serious, you know. It was like I definitely wasn't, you know, yeah, that was it, you know, wasn't the grensvechter of the war at all by any means. But you know, I think that is more for some other people.
I think the reality is that a very small minority of national servicemen
Yes,
or even
yes,
PFs actually saw any
yes,
contact. I think it was
yes. You're
almost
right.
a myth that
Yeah,
because you served, you saw
yeah.
contact.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
yes, yes, yes.
it
And it's
was.
an
I
interesting
mean,
point when you meet South Africans. Yeah, when you meet South Africans now afterwards, like, you know, everybody was like a parabat and everybody was in Angola, and it's like so annoying. But you're right. I think people
and I mean,
even to this day regret that. You know. Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I was on Skeptic, Smoke Shell,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we thought, well, I think that was probably the biggest ground attack to that point, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I only discovered now recently. I mean, there were only about 1,100 of us on the operation,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
included your tiffies and your support.
Yeah.
The parabats that didn't get anywhere because they didn't. Chopper fuel never pitched. They were supposed to be a stopper group. So even out of that 1,100, probably only 200-300 actually saw any action
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was a big number, you know. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But Andre, what I think I'm going to do is maybe end it off now, and then we'll
Okay.
catch up later and do your Recce and Israeli, because I would imagine that's
Yeah. Yeah.
got quite a lot to tell on that side, and then we'll
Yeah.
just do a sort of
Yeah.
second episode,
Okay. Cool.
if
That'll
you're
be
happy
great.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally
Okay. Well,
cool.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining
Cool.
us, Andre. It's been great to hear your story. And for the
Thanks, Andrew.
legacy
Thanks for the
viewers,
opportunity.
yeah. And I've just got light back
Hey,
as
your
well.
light's on.
Yeah, load shedding's
Cool.
finished. Yeah. And for the legacy viewers, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. And until we meet again, thank you and good night. And it's
Cool.
still late morning over there in Seattle, but
Yeah. Yeah.
9:30 at night. Thanks, André.
Cool.
Cheers. We'll make a
Thanks,
plan
Andrew.
for a couple
Thanks.
of weeks' time.
Yeah,
All right. Cheers.
perfect. Thanks, man. All right. See you. Bye.